Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera yang berbahagia datuk-datuk, tuan-tuan dan puan-puan hadirin yang dihormati sekalian. Saya terlebih dahulu ingin mengucapkan ribuan terima kasih dan melafazkan syukur kepada Allah SWT kerana kita dapat berjumpa pada hari ini. Sebenarnya misi saya kemari adalah untuk belajar. We are going to learn together on a topic which is so complicated and is so relevant for us today, and I know that UATM has been advancing this idea for a longer time than we have had in USIM. Although we are an Islamic university, but I think areas of this nature does not come by quite easily when you look at what this whole dimension is all about. Yeah? So today I would want to a little bit share with you some of the work that we have done in USIM. USIM to me is the Islamic USM. Yeah, I was in USM for 10 years. We never get to talk about Islam and the vision of Islam because, quote unquote, it is not an Islamic university. But this is the first thing that I want to remind ourselves. The moment we talk about things, we don't have to classify them whether they Islamic ataupun tidak. I think ini masalah kita. Kadang-kadang everything must have the Islamic label, and the Islamic label sometimes tidak menyampai pun. Yeah? So when we talk about Islamic labels and therefore we look at models, quote unquote, within the Islamic constraint, then we get countries that we actually do not see Islam being practiced. And I was just talking to Datuk Nazri tadi. I just came back from Japan. And I would consider Japan as a Muslim country. May not be Islamic country. And very much so, the moment I walked out of Kansai University, the first restaurant on my left is a halal udon restaurant. Yeah? And dia punya halal tu lebih halal daripada kita in the sense that if you are a non-Muslim, if you drink alcohol, they'll give you a special glass. And that glass is not to be used for Muslims. And we do not do that in Malaysia. Yeah? And another restaurant in Hokkaido is a halal restaurant. They've got two different sets of cutlery and utilities for the non-Muslim and the Muslims. See, when we talk about Muslim countries, therefore, we don't even practice that. Here is a non-Muslim, quote-unquote, countries practice something which is much better than we have done. So I would not want to classify which is Islamic, which is non-Islamic, which is Muslim, which is not Muslim. I think as long as their practice is something that we can agree to and something that we can learn from, and I think we should learn from them. Yeah? And the other thing that I learned, and I think you must have also read, the Japanese JR, Japan Railway, about 2 weeks ago, make an apology to the public. And the apology is because they left the station earlier by 20 seconds. Yeah? They left the station by 20 seconds, they apologized because they're supposed to leave promptly at the time that was allocated. Kita sometimes stay in the station for 2 hours, we still do not apologize. Yeah? So this is where we look at things in the context of values rather than who they are and what they are in this particular sense. Yeah? So today I think I'll do two parts with you. One is to talk about the overall general idea of what this Qalb-Guided leadership is all about, so that we can find a context. And the context to me is certainly universal. Not just Malaysia, not just Southeast Asia, not just Islamic country. I think we want to bring it to a level of universalism and how you can assimilate it to as many countries as possible. That's one. Yeah? And the second part, I think we will try and bring it down to our institutional level and indeed to ourselves as an individual who will take this on as part and parcel of our practice, right? And it's not, the classification is not very rigid, sometimes it overlaps, but let me just try and go ahead with this. Now, why do we do this in USIM? Because I think this is the first question that we ask ourselves. What is the state of leadership today? We have been now 17 years into the 21st century, and I think the story in the 21st century, 17 years later, is not as rosy as we think it is. We were promised a 21st century which is better than before, with all sorts of peacefulness and equal distribution and so on and so forth, learning from the 20th century as it were, but we don't see that happening, and therefore the question that was asked, what is the state of leadership? And this is taking from Harvard Business Review. When we talk about Harvard, nobody wants to question anymore because they're supposed to be, quote-unquote, the gospel truth. But this is what they say. The state of leadership today, dia katanya, is inundated by increasing perception of incompetence, greed, and frivolity. Whether it's true ataupun tidak, it depends on where you look and how you look at it. Yeah? But generally, I think this is a global phenomenon. The word incompetence, the word greed and frivolity is something that we see every day and everywhere. Right? The last one, of course, the announcement by Trump that Jerusalem will be the capital of Israel. And the discussion why it was made is another horrendous discussion that you will see later on. Yeah? But if you are greedy on your own and you're incompetent on your own and frivolous on your own, it still doesn't matter. But then this is at the expense of the governed, the taxed, and the managed. So kita di university misalnya, the governed, the taxed, and the managed are our students. Yeah? If you are incompetent, if you are greedy and frivolous, then the students are the victims of all these things that we are trying to do as a context of leaders. And the context of leaders to me is not the vice chancellors or deputy vice chancellors or head of department. All of us in this particular context are leaders because that's what the Qalb-based guided leadership is all about. It reduces itself back to you as a leader and how do you take this on. Yeah? So this is something I'm sure is not acceptable and something that we need to do something about it. Saying that it's not acceptable and not doing something about it, I think it's also not a leadership role. The moment we find something which is not right, leaders must put back what is right. And how do you find this to do this is something that we will hopefully discuss through this particular lecture. Because of that, you can see impacts of this nature. Yeah? Generally, I think the impact is about disparities of what I call the imbalance between the people who have and the people who have not. Yeah? And when we talk about education being a leveler of society, the promise was when you have your education, you should be able to promote yourself out of poverty, for example. Run into all these problems, then you find that this is no longer the truth. Despite being educated, we find there's a lot more problem coming into being, and the question is why, and therefore the question becomes an important question. As you look into the future, you will see more and more crisis. Yeah, it is very, very well experienced as far as the weather is concerned. You can see that the weather is making a lot of quote-unquote problems for the people who are not able to adapt to this kind of changes, right? And I think it's not just the it's not just the crisis ahead, I think it's also the leadership crisis ahead. What sort of leadership crisis are we going to see ahead of us is something that should concern us, because it would mean that the future that we want to craft is something that is quite different. Whether there's a future, whether there's a future that we want, is something else that we need to talk about in this particular session. Yeah? So that is why I think this whole question of leadership becomes important to us, because it's almost like finding an alternative to what we've got. Many of the things that we have experimented, and it's not seems to be working, therefore we need to continuously look for something which is better ahead of us. I think this is a slide that I use very so often, because you see that the kind of imbalance that we see, it ranges from the economy to the ecology to even this geopolitical status and also the social status, the discrepancy between the rich and the poor, the kind of distribution of wealth that we see today, right? And therefore, we are talking about a chaotic world, and the question is, how do you find the balance in this chaotic world? How do you put back the balance? How do you bring back peace into a world that is chaotic, or into an institution that is chaotic, or into a society that's chaotic? Yeah? We are told that there are many leadership roles, from autocratic right down to transformational, which has been talked about in Malaysia often enough, where everything that you want to transform, the economy, education, governments, and so on and so forth. But what is this all about, and how does it translate into what it means for the people on the ground, is a question that we will ask very quickly. Okay? But the tendency, as far as the trend is concerned, 17 years into the 21st century, the world is now going to isolate itself. You look at Brexit, Britain wants to get out of the European Union, right? Our friend here then come out with the whole idea of America first. The rest does not matter. America must come first. so-called idea of American exceptionalism. Yeah? Despite people are now running away and looking for refuge and shelter. So countries like this will close their doors down and say, we don't want you anymore because it's about us and us only. And therefore we find that a lot of these people do not know where to go, despite the crisis of a huge dimension after a long period of time. And as though that is not enough, we begin to read also, Catalonia wants to get out of Spain. So it's look as though ahead, everybody just wants to take care of their own periuk nasi, that's it. Right? We are no longer talking about quote-unquote globalization the way we are made to understand. This internationalization does not make sense anymore if everybody trying to close their doors. Yeah? This whole idea of a globalized world does not mean much to us. So this is a time I think we need to evaluate where are we and where do we take this forward as far as university and the leadership role is concerned. So ahead of me, I think the future is a rather bleak one, right? And therefore, we now begin to look at what is leadership all about and what can we do about it. Now, to understand leadership, I'm not a leadership student, but there is a little bit that we do in USIM. We know that this whole idea of leadership is something which is not fixed. It changes from time to time. It changes from event to event. It changes from situation to situation. So if you start with a laissez-faire leadership, that anything goes as long as it doesn't create a lot of problem, then you can go ahead with it. Yeah? But over time, when people evaluate leadership, people will find that some leadership are more effective than others, and therefore there is this continuum of evolution of leadership. So from laissez-faire leadership, which is passive and effective, now they create another form of leadership, which is called transsectional leadership. I want to bring the point that people create leadership ideas. It is not something that is given to us. I think in a university, sometimes when you read the book of transsectional leadership, you think this is something that's given to us and therefore we need to follow them. I say we don't have to. Yeah? When I started as a Vice Chancellor of University of Science Malaysia, learning what leadership is all about, I read all sorts of books as far as leadership. The 7 traits of this, 8 habits of that, 9 of this and stuff like that. At the end of the day, it doesn't mean much to me because it doesn't resonate with what I want. Yeah? And therefore, we begin to look for other models and what actually is better for us in our own context. Yeah? So when we talk about transsectional leadership as an alternative to laissez-faire leadership, people are also saying it's not as effective as you think it is. Right? It is rather passive as compared to the other form of leadership that we talked about. So we generate another one. It's called transformational leadership. And certainly, from one form of leadership to another form of leadership, there is a kind of a difference. Yeah? And this is where I call the continuum. And what stops us from creating our own leadership model? Who says that we cannot create our own leadership model? Misalnya kalau dalam kita ambil dari segi istilah sajalah. Ya, perkataan leadership dalam Melayunya is kepimpinan ataupun kepemimpinan. Yeah? They call leader, we call pemimpin. Now, pemimpin dengan leader is two different things. Pimpin is where I hold hands and we walk together. Yeah? Kita pimpin, kita pegang tangan, kita jalan bersama. The notion of one person up front and we follow him is not pimpin. Itu mengeko ataupun membuntut. Macam itik ikut je. Kalau dia masuk lubuk, kita pun masuk lubuk. Yeah? Whereas pimpin has a different concept altogether. Now, where do you put this concept of people holding hands and moving together when you only understand leaders must be in front, the rest will need to follow him or her? And this is where I think the context of culture, the context of value, the context of civilization becomes important. You come from a different civilization and you understand this. Eh? You go to Sabah and Sarawak, they talk about kepimpinan in a different form. They say, leader for us is something that whoever we choose. You don't tell us that you are my leader. I need to choose you in the context whether I will accept you as a leader ataupun tidak. Yeah? You go to kumpulan orang asli. We always told that Batin Hitam is a leader. No, dia kata Datuk Batin is a leader. For them, no, Datuk Batin is something that the government gives us. We have got our own leader among ourselves. So people understand this quite differently, And therefore, I don't want us to get into a kind of a fixed idea that the leader is only understood from what Harvard say or Oxford say or somebody else says, you know, and we do not have a choice to pick and choose what we want, right? And Burns will talk about leadership in a different form. Dia yang mengatakan dia is not sufficient, and therefore created this idea of transformational leadership. Dia kata transformational leadership as a process where leaders and followers raises one another to a higher level of morality and motivation. If you understand this, maknanya, me as a leader and you as a follower, or vice versa, we have got this responsibility of raising one another to a higher level of morality. And this is what, Sayyidina Abu Bakr has been saying. If I'm a leader and I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. Because we need to raise one another to that higher level of morality. Doesn't mean that you are a leader, you're perfect, and that when you do wrong, I will not be able to say something about it. And this is sometimes the situation where we are in. We find that leaders not doing the right thing, we are not supposed to say something about it. And therefore, in this particular context, we are not transformational. Yeah? Nampak dia punya difference. So if you take transformational leadership, there is this negotiation between you and the follower. As a leader, I will tell you if you're wrong, and as a follower, you will tell me as a leader if I'm wrong, so that we can raise to this level of morality and motivation. And this is something that I think it is useful for us to develop further, because Burns stopped at that particular level. And therefore, Burns says, to have this, there must be ethics. Morality, ethics. Yeah? Divorced from ethics, you got the leadership is reduced to management. Therefore, you just follow. Right? Management is doing something that people ask you to do at the end of the day, trying to keep the best that you could. You don't change the policy because you just manage. And this is what management is all about. And politics is a mere technique. Yeah? Technique of what? Technique of getting support, technique of getting power, technique to stay in place, and so on and so forth. These are what it's all about. And therefore, the issue of ethics and morality becomes a critical issue in leadership. And this is where the Qalb leadership becomes an important continuum as far as that leadership is concerned. Now, why transactional leadership is not good? Because in the understanding of this, yeah, it is deemed to be ineffective and passive because it appeals to the follower's self-interest to motivate their performance. What is it that you want to perform? Okay, I want 20 ringgit extra an hour to do work. Okay, there you are. As long as you are motivated and you perform well, I will follow your self-interest. Yeah? And also emphasizes on the exchange of rewards or benefit for the compliance with the leader's request. If I'm a leader now, I want you to do something, and you say, okay, for this we need to exchange. I will do this for you, provided you do this for me. That's the word transaction comes in. Yeah? So there's an exchange of rewards or benefit if I want you to do something. So the whole idea of motivating people is more of following what their interests and what they want. Yeah? Routine changes, lack of authenticity and integrity for the higher purpose. Therefore, I do work because I have this reward from you. I do work because I have this benefit for you. There's no sense of higher purpose, meaning kalau orang Islam tu kita nak buat ni because kita nak dapat pahala. The pahala punya part does not come into picture. If you don't pay me, I don't want to do. Although never mind pahala, I can get it later perhaps. Yeah? But I want what I want now. The higher purpose of trying membina negara, I saw the word nation building there in your core values. Yeah? You want to build a nation, but you don't want to build a nation if you are not rewarded. Yeah? You don't want to build your community if you don't have a PJK or a Tan Sri. I want the Tan Sri better than more than anything else. Yeah? So this sense of higher purpose ini, maknanya niat kita sudah berubah. And therefore there is what we call the lack of authenticity ini, maknanya the principle that we hold is no longer valuable to us. So we follow whatever people tell us because we want what we need. And it gets worse when it involves this. So your exchange can be this. Yeah? So transactional leadership opens up the door to corruption, the door to all sorts of other pollution as far as ethics and morality is concerned. And that's why they say this is not effective, and we need to replace them with what they call the transformational leadership. Yeah? And we have seen this a lot of time. You want to do this, you don't do it. During election, there is something else. Yeah? I give you this, but give me your votes. This is transactional. We're beginning to see this. As election draw near, you begin to see this, read this all the time in the newspapers. Yeah? I give you this, but please vote us. Otherwise, the transaction is off. Yeah? But some people are smarter. They take what you give them, they still don't vote you. So that's transactional leadership. All right? So it's so blatant in that particular respect. So how do you move now? The first thing we talk about transformational leadership, how it differs from there is the issue of integrity and authenticity. You're beginning to see that we're beginning to bring in values as much as possible. Yeah? The values is important, ethics, morality is important. Authenticity means you stick to what you believe and you pursue it. It doesn't mean that if I talk to the VC and the VC say, hari ni merah, I say, yes, Datuk, hari ni merah, Datuk. When I go and talk to the registrar kata, no, hari ni kuning. Ah, betul, hari ni kuning juga. Yeah? And you go and talk to your dean, kata, hari ni hitam. Oh, hitam juga, it's okay. Yeah? You don't have a principle to hold on to. And this is what Stephen Covey says in his book, Personality Ethics. Ni macam the chameleon. Yeah? It changes its color wherever you go because you want the comfort for yourself. It's not the principle that you hold. That's where we call the lack of authenticity. But in transformational leadership, you want to transform and you stick to the principle that you want to transform for. What is it that you want to transform? And therefore, my question to university, whoever is a professor, they must profess something. And that's why you are called a professor. We don't call you a professor because your gaji is so much. You call you a professor because you profess something. What is it that you profess? But most of our professors do not profess. So I think my suggestion is take it back. Take the professor back because they don't profess. Profess maknanya, what is the principle that you hold? What are the higher goals that you want to attain? And that's the principle that we recognize. Professor A ini dia punya apa yang dia profess. Professor B ini dia. Professor C ini dia. And there is a sense of value that you hold as far as that professor is concerned. And its integrity, in other words, you stick to it. Come rain or storm, the principle stays because that's what you are and that's your profession in that particular respect. Yeah? So transformationally, not as easy as that. It has a sense of value, and that sense of value is what makes you, quote-unquote, transformational. So at the end of the day, if you read this transformational leadership, if you do it well, you will end up to be a charismatic leader. Yeah? That people begin to see you in the light of your values and your commitment. And these are some examples of charismatic leaders. Look at them. All of them has got values attached to it. Yeah? Gandhi, the non-violence principle of Satyagraha. He managed to chase out the British colonials. Bajunya ni je. Dua kain putih atas bawah. Yeah? And the British tell them, I don't like the way you dress. And the kata, sorry sir, I dress because of you. If it's not because of you, I prefer to go naked. Yeah? Or dia tak kata, I'm sorry sir, tomorrow I will dress like you. They hold to their principles. They understand why they dress that way. Yeah? Martin Luther King, I have a dream. Kena tembak sudahnya. Yeah? He died with his dream. Yeah? Yasser Arafat, the struggle is still on. Now the struggle is even higher now, with Jerusalem being, being the pawn. Yeah? Muhammad Ali refused to go and draft for the Vietnam War. He said, I have nothing to do with the Vietnamese. Why do I need to draft and kill them? Yeah? He was removed as a champion or whatever for boxing, but he's still the greatest. Muhammad Ali is still the greatest. Everybody will know Muhammad Ali is still the greatest. So, Nelson Mandela, 27 tahun dalam penjara. Keluar-keluar aja dia kata, I forgive all of you. Kita kalau Dean kata, Punish kita, besok jaga aku, cala kita kau. This is the kind of thing. And dia jadi president only for one term. Mandela could be a president for life. Mandela said, I just want to be a one-term president, 5 tahun sudah. And these are what we call charismatic leaders. Not because they are good-looking, of course sometimes some of them are good-looking, yeah? But more because of their principles. For good-looking, most of us will not be charismatic, because we are not that, people like Cruz or whatever it is become charismatic. They are there because of the principle, because of something that they profess. And I think that makes a difference as far as leadership is concerned. And this is something that we want to develop in the academic world. You stay because of your principle, and your principle is backed up because of the knowledge that you've got. And there's no way that you need to compromise until you're proven wrong in that particular sense. Yeah? So, but there is another book, I think you must have read this also, From Good to Great. Jim Collins kata, the highest level of leaders is a blend of personal humility and professional will. Yeah? And this word humility to me is an important word, an extremely important word. Bila saya baca ini, dan saya terkenang bahawa kita ada juga pepatah mengatakan ikut resmi padi, lagi berisi, lagi tunduk. That's humility. Yeah? But until Jim Collins write the book From Good to Great, we forget about lagi berisi, lagi tunduk. None of us, I think, would profess this. Because in the academic world, we are not supposed to be humble. That's why I don't like people read CVs. CVs will tell you how good you are, although we are not so good. Yeah? We are told to pat our CV all the time so that people think they are quote-unquote an expert, when you are not even an expert. Yeah? We have moved away from this whole idea of humility to arrogance. Everybody must call you a professor if you're a professor. Kalau tak panggil doktor pun marah, saya pun doktor tau. Iyalah. Yeah? If you got a Tan Sri, Datuk, professor, lagi parah. You don't call me a Tan Sri today, I get very upset. Our world is a world of arrogance. Yeah? And we nurture it from somebody else's culture. Bila saya jadi pengurusi dekat USIM, the first statement I make, never announce kedatangan pengurusi USIM. I mean, what is so great about pengurusi USIM anyway? Sila bangun. They don't want to stand up, but you force them to stand up. If they want to stand up, let them stand up. If they don't want to stand up, that's okay. Yeah, but we have to make it a rule, when the pengurusi comes in, everybody must stand up. That is not the kind of culture that we want to develop when we talk about humility. And when we talk about this, kita harapkan kita memang banyaklah ni ilmu kita. And therefore kita lebih tunduk. The Chinese have the same thing. The higher the bamboo, the lower the angle. Yeah? And it's very much an Eastern way of looking at it. But here it mentions this humility, but the humility is always gone because of the other word called ego. Yeah? And when we in university, we always talk about this legacy that we want to leave behind. And therefore, when the new VC comes in, they go, last VC, throw it away, I want to build my own legacy. Yeah? And therefore, university in Malaysia always starts from zero. We always start from zero. We never built on the leadership before us, because our legacy is so damn important that we don't care what the rest has done. And that is what ego is all about. Yeah? Tapi dia kata ego, for people who at the last 5 level ni, dia kata you drive your ego away into something that builds organization. But still this word ego is an important issue. So benda-benda macam ini will make us think, how do you deal with humility? How do you deal with ego? What sort of leadership model are we talking about in this particular context? Yeah? Let me just dwell a little bit about this ego business. Something to do with fourth industrial revolution that we'll talk about a little bit later. We are now moving into what we call the Anthropocene age. The last age is called the Holocene age. The Holocene age maknanya is an era where we build civilizations. And that's why we are at this stage of time. Civilization is well built. But the Anthropocene age is the age where we make the civilization collapse. Right? And what does it mean here? Here basically, the Anthropocene age starts somewhere here in the 1950s. But look at this. This is where your first industrial revolution starts. This is where your second industrial revolution starts. And somewhere here is what the third industrial revolution starts. For the last two industrial revolutions, we are almost there. Very stable. Yeah? But the takeoff here is what we call the Great Acceleration in 1950s, where everything starts to shoot up. The third industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, this goes up and up and up. All right? And somebody tried to map this with what's going on in the world. You see this. The GDP goes up, but everything else still goes up. Pollution goes up, CO2 concentration goes up, motor vehicle goes up, ozone depletion goes up, paper consumption goes up, everything goes up. Yeah? And this is where people are saying that the human beings are beginning to destroy their own civilization. Because anything goes up must come down. That's the rule of law. That's the rule of nature. Tak ada benda yang naik. Yeah? So that's a fault of the model that we think about. In terms of planning, in terms of development, there must be some point where we need to stop growing and stabilize. And what is this model that we talk about? And that's where the leadership role becomes another important consideration. If this is something too abstract for you, look at this. Yeah? The animals around us, mula tahun ini, at the same time, this is the first industrial revolution. By the time we arrive at the third industrial revolution, all these things now are at the level of being extinct. As big as elephant, we probably will not see it maybe 2 or 3 generations from now. Even anak kita sekarang ni, ask them to draw a chicken, what do you get? You just get a drumstick. Because that's the only chicken they know. They have not seen a chicken. I can bet you many of your anak have not seen a chicken before. The real chicken, I mean. And the real chicken is a drumstick. And very soon they are not going to see all the rest. Your elephant, your fish, your birds and stuff like that. Because these are extinct. And we are going into another phase called the sixth mass extinction, where 90% of the species will be vanquished. And that's the world that we're getting into. And that's why I'm quite pessimistic into the kind of world we are getting in until and unless we change what leadership is all about and what's the meaning of this. Yeah? And worse still, because this is something that's already been predicted. A very general sort of literature like the Times talked about this in 1989. But we have not done anything about it because we think this is not important. The leadership thinks this is not important. Yeah? Maybe that's again that do not strike you, but let me show you this is something that when it comes to the human being itself, yeah? The kind of global inequality that we're going to face as we moved on. In 2015, we see 80 of the richest people own the same wealth as 3.5 billion poorest people, which is half of the world population. We've got 7 billion. Yeah? And these 80 people are basically 80 male, lelaki, and white. They're not even brown. Yeah? And this is a kind of a stereotype that has gone into. So 80% can probably fit in a bus. 80 people can fit in the bus. Yeah? But the next year, it's gone down from 80 to only 62 people. Right? Maybe you still need a bus. But this year, the number is just 8. From a single, from double digit to single. 8 orang saja yang mempunyai harta lebih sama ataupun sama dengan 3.0 bilion orang termiskin di dunia. I cannot imagine this. If I'm that 8 people here in this room, meaning to say that I have half of this room to myself, you guys can go to another half of the room. You just can imagine that. Yeah? I don't care, you just go to the other half of the room, because the other half of the room is mine and my 7 other friends. We don't need a bus anymore, we just need a van. there's a kind of disparity that we are facing, and there's a kind of leadership where they talk about this incompetence, greed, and frivolity that I mentioned to you earlier. Yeah? There's a graph that goes, in 2010, the 300 orang, you can fit an aeroplane. Right now, you just need a small van. But this year, or next year, we predict only 3 orang. So you just need a beca. Only 3 people, we don't need a van anymore. Yeah? A trishaw can fit 3 people, and that's it. Right? So that's the kind of world that we are going to face. That's the kind of world that you're going to face. People like me will face out myself maybe 5 years from now. But you will have to face this kind of world. And being in Asia, 60% of the world population is in Asia. And therefore, the bulk of the problem, we are more vulnerable compared to other parts of the world. Yeah, other parts of the world are shrinking because of the demographic shift. Yeah? America, Europe in particular, but here we are still very vibrant. 60% of the population stays there. Right? So that is to give you the context of where we are in the setting of the kind of leadership role that we have now. To me, it is something that is of concern, and therefore we need to understand why. Yeah? To understand why is to understand the bigger world. And this is why I think kalau kita cakap tentang Qalb ni, don't just talk about the Islamic world. The Islamic world is one world, but there are other worlds that we need to talk about. And this is where, when we look at the so-called leadership, and this is the work that was done when we categorize this kind of ideas, values, models that people are, giving us, it comes from this quadrant of authoritarian and also neoliberal sort of quadrant. And if you see the dominant world, power is here. This is in 1906. Yeah? It's still time Bush, Spanish, and all these are basically the Europeans and American sort of leadership that dictates and tells you where the world is moving. Right? Then Obama comes into the picture in 2008. Obama starts somewhere here, which is not too bad, somewhere in the center. By the time Obama gets elected, he has moved a little bit more to the authoritarian type. Right? Just for references, Nelson Mandela is somewhere here, and Dalai Lama is somewhere there. These people have got different values as compared to these people. Now, when we talk about Donald Trump, furthest, the worst of the lot. The worst of the lot. And yet kita berkiblatkan Amerika Syarikat to take our values and our signals of where to go. All right? And my issue is, why can't we create our own? Why do you need to stick to this? I know it's a dominant power, but why don't we try and disentangle some of these issues that we are facing today? And this is where I think the leadership model, the leadership role becomes important. So what do we do? Sorry. Huh? Well, it's not working now. Mechanical part is better. So for us in the education world, we have got a kind of a dilemma. When we talk about education, siapa yang memberitahu kita what education is all about for us? All the while we've been talking about this Ivy League, Oxbridge and stuff like that, which is fine. All right? But we are in a dilemma because if you look at this, they kata, education is a field sometimes beset by theories of the day, with an easy panacea that overpromise the degree to which we can elevate pressing educational problems. Right? There's always a theory behind what we are doing. It is not something that happens just yesterday, or somebody, tells that this is what you want to do. There is a theory of today. And the theory of today, as far as education is concerned, is what we call the human capital theory, modal insan. A word which I'm not very happy with. Yeah? What is this modal insan theory? So we talk about modal insan, berapi-api kadang kita mesti membangunkan modal insan yang boleh membina negara, bla 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 bla. Yeah? But what is modal insan? I think half of us do not know. So who are we trying to actually build in this particular context? From this particular literature, Modal Insan is spelled out. You can go and Google it, yeah? But I just want to bring you to this level. The first para aja. And this is what it says. Dia kata, throughout Western countries, education has been re-theorized. Now, my first point is, why do you need to re-theorize? What's wrong with the old theory? Has the old theory been not working well that you need to re-theorize? And science says what we do. If it doesn't work, we re-theorize it and make it better. But they want to re-theorize it because they want to make education primarily as an economic device. That's why they want to re-theorize it. Because under the human capital theory, they kata is the most influential economic theory of Western education. So the word Western education ni pun kita kena underline. Because if we look at the history of education of Malaysia, in fact, all parts of the world is basically coming from the Western origin. There's another lecture for that one. Setting the framework of government policies since 1960s, it is increasingly as a key determinant of economic performance. And therefore, you are not surprised, yeah, that the university are asked to generate their own income, when formerly this was not the deal. Because we are a public institution, the income must come to the taxpayer money is for education. Now, no, you have to generate your own income. Why? Because now we are part of this economic device. Yeah? And not only that, if you go further, there's the second part of it. They kata the strategy. What is a strategy to make you an economic device? They kata the key strategy in determining economic performance has been employed to employ a conception of individuals as human capital and the various economic metaphors. Yeah? What are the metaphors? Technological change, research, innovation, productivity, education, competitiveness. So the moment you talk about economic technological change, it is about bringing economy into the picture. And therefore, when you talk about the fourth industrial revolution, this is the ultimate goal. How do you increase more GDP and stuff like that? Your research is about economy. You are supposed to bring certain amount of money, and then you can get promoted. Yeah? Innovation is about that. I innovate, what do? I sell. I got a patent, then I bring more economic income. So the whole context of this human capital theory is about human capital. What about human being? Yeah? We are training human being, we are not training human capital. And then dia kata di sini, the other, dia kata human capital then is defined as the economic self-interest of the individual. So I come here because of my own individual needs economically. And dia kata other forms of behavior are excluded or treated as a distortion of the model. So bila kita cakap tentang kalbu, dia kata no, this is not part of the human capital theory. You cannot bring this in. Because we are no longer talking about economic self-interest of the individual. And that's why this whole idea of Qalb-Guided leadership becomes important to change the concept of what leadership is all about. It is not because it's an Islamic thing or because, but there is a need to change for this when you talk about ethics, morality, and the rest of it. Yeah? Just want to remind you, if you don't change that, this is a prediction. Yeah? The top 1% will go up, and up. The bottom 90% will go down, and down. And this is what the human capital theory is all about, because the concentration of wealth and power will then be on the other side of the world, not this side of the world. Okay? And that is what the re-theorizing of education is all about. The impact then, university becomes a factory, yeah? And the standards of education becomes lower and lower. We do not have the flexibility of debates disagreement, and so on and so forth. Everything needs to be followed by a set of a rule. Now, therefore, we need to see this as a kind of a way to move forward. And this is where we go back to the literature and we discover we need to just move beyond charisma, and this is where we find the work of Al-Ghazali, Imam Al-Ghazali becomes important. Imam Al-Ghazali mengatakan the first thing that you need to get rid of as a leader is ego. Dahlah jadi leader tu, sometimes jadi VC, you get dizzy for a while, because you are not a VC. Yeah? And that ego becomes another swollen-headed thing. But Al-Ghazali said the first thing you want to be a leader, you get rid of this ego thing. Yeah? And they kata, how to get rid of the ego, you need to develop at least 4 traits, which is wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice, and these must be in a perfect balance. And this is where I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. Let's forget about it. There, ni dia kata. Yeah? Declare your jihad. For those who are non-Muslim, jihad means struggle, not about cutting somebody's head or somebody's hand. Jihad on 12 enemies that you cannot see, and the first one is ego. From ego, you will get all the others. Arrogant, conceited, selfishness, greed, lust, intolerance, anger, and all those other things. Yeah? Dia kata, if you can master and destroy them, these 12 things, then you are ready to fight the enemy that you see. In other words, the first enemy that you need to fight is yourself. If you are not able to fight the enemy within, you can forget about the enemy outside, because that's where the transactional leadership comes in. The enemy outside will give, Tansi, I'll give you 10,000 today. Can you give me this? And the enemy inside kata, 10,000 banyak lah. Take it. Ask for some more. Maybe 20,000. Because the enemy inside is already colluding with the enemy outside. I give you my first experience as a Vice Chancellor of University of Science Malaysia. I got a phone call from somebody else who I do not know. And dia punya offer dekat saya, I do not know these people. And the first question was, how much do you want? Imagine, I've been in office less than 2 weeks. How much do you want? And I asked him, what for? Director, I want you to put my daughter in your medical school. Alhamdulillah, God gave me guidance. I say, I'm sorry, it's not how we operate, and I put down the phone. Cuba kau kata, can you give me 3 million? If this enemy within say, 3 million, masa tu Zul, 3 million Zul. Okay, 3 million. Say, can you give me 3 million? I'm done. As a leader, I'm done. He will come back and say, I want now to put my great uncle in your medical school. I'll give you another 5 million. You sell your soul. Your authenticity, your integrity is out. And you are no longer a character for a leader. So ini penting bagi saya. That you need to fight the enemy within. Forget about the enemy outside. There are plenty of them. But they are all now working with the enemy inside. Until you know how to control this, you will not be able to be a good leader. And this is what Al-Ghazali tells us. So Al-Ghazali tells us bahawa you need to have this wisdom, courage, and temperance. At the end of the day, the collusion of these 3 will end up in justice. And in Islam, the ultimate outcome of a leader is justice, not power. The one we see outside us now is all about power. And therefore justice becomes number 2 or number 3 or not at all. And this is where he says you need to concentrate that, and he says also we need to work in an equilibrium. That equilibrium tu maknanya every day the enemy inside must be balanced within these 3: wisdom, courage, and temperance. Once you do that, you get a balance, then justice becomes the automatic outcome. Yeah? And therefore, when you talk about justice in this particular context, it doesn't matter what race you come from, where you come from, what religion, where you are in the status symbol, it doesn't matter. Because that's what justice is all about. We have no time to go into that, but that is ultimately the role. And dia mengatakan bahawa justice is not a particular virtue, justice is the sum of many virtues. Yeah? So you need to balance this. Kerja kita as a leader is every day to find that we are in a state of balance. And this is where I think the second part nanti we will go into this. Yeah? And this whole idea, again I want to decide, I say tak payah kita cakap Islamic label ni. Because the whole idea comes from Plato. Plato said bahawa dia kata the form of virtues are justice, courage, temperance dan banyak lagi. Wisdom pun ada. Yeah. Dan Plato punya idea ni is taken by Cicero, a Roman emperor, and also a philosopher. Dia mengata out of the so many, dia kata virtues may be the habit of the mind in harmony with reasons and order of nature and has 4 parts, which is wisdom, tapi dipanggil in the Latin word, justice, courage and temperance. And Al-Ghazali picked this idea up. And dia mengatakan, yes, courage, wisdom, temperance and justice, but he added it in a perfect balance. Because the Roman ada ini, tapi the Roman Empire hancur juga. Why? Because sometimes this is not in a balance. Justice certainly is not in a balance during the Roman time. Yeah? You find that the gladiator fighting with a lion and all sorts, because slavery and stuff like that, this is the issue. So just Al-Ghazali add this up and say, yes, you need to have the 4, but you need to keep this as an equilibrium. And I think that's the model of the Qalb leadership that we talked about. Yeah? And certainly when Ghazali took this, not just depending on what the Romans and the Greeks says, dia juga berbalik-balik pada Al-Quran. Yeah? That's how what my colleagues in Nusim kata, yeah, dalam Quran they talk about justice, they talk about balance, they talk about wisdom, wise, yeah? They talk about self-audit, which is part of that, and they talk about courage. Right? And not only the Al-Quran, I think you know this, and they talk also about the Prophet. Quran just give you the writings, but the Prophet practiced it. So maknanya apa yang dikata Al-Ghazali itu is not something yang kita tak boleh buat. We can do it. Yeah? What does the Prophet do? The Prophet live modestly, talk softly, walk humbly, dress simply, speak honestly, lead justly, practice faithfully, think truthfully, learn obediently, and many more. Yeah? Teach patiently, advise wisely, work diligently, transact ethically. This is where the transaction leadership tadi itu, all of them are not ethical. Plan systematically, behave respectfully, act moderately, interact politely, but fight courageously. This is where the integrity and authenticity is. If you have courage, you need to fight. You fight courageously. Tak payah, ya boleh buat balik. Alah, aku kena buat ni pula lah. Baru nak mungut. Yeah? Atau masa saya jadi VC, bila berjumpa dengan menteri, everybody, balik YB, balik. Masuk lift semua mungut. Alamak, ini kena buat pula. Masuk lift pun nak bising. Dalam bilik mesyuarat tak mau bising. Yeah? This is what, they fight uncourageously. So you see, this whole dimension becomes a universal and a civilizational dimension. It is just not talking about Islam in the Muslim world, because there's no model in the Muslim world that do this. Saudi Arabia ke, Kuwait ke, pergilah mana-mana pun, you hardly see this. You probably see this in Japan, you probably see this in Finland, you probably see this in Scandinavia. They are not Islamic in that particular sense, but the values are there. Yeah? So let's not catch up in this. So in a model maknanya, every day ini kita mesti jadi satu benda yang kita, what you call, conscious about. I walk into the office today, I need to be a balanced person. And that balance could be your own virtues. Yeah? Macam-macam lah lagi. But the 4 is something that dia kata a must. And that balance is not just a balance that you think intellectually, but also the balance that you think from your qalbu, which is another seat of intellect. All right? So let's do a little bit more. So this balance ni, bagi saya, we don't think about balance of daching lah. I'm not saying anything about daching, but it's not a balance of two things. Kiri dengan kanan, hitam dengan putih, things like that. It's a balance of many things. And this is what makes it more difficult. So the concept of balance ini bukan konsep yang dua benda, tiga benda saja. You have many things. So I would just want to give you a kind of a, if you talk about this as a kind of an orbit, all these values, the four even more, once in a while you will try to balance it. And I'll go into this a little bit more when we talk about what Al-Ghazali said in this particular context. And it makes it more easier if you are God conscious. So in other, you know what this balance is all about, this mizan that we talk about in the Quran, and this concept of balance. And it's not only just the mizan, I think the Buddhist and the Indian has also got a concept of balance in that particular context. So once in a while, ataupun kita cuba nak balancekan ni. Yeah? But the more you do this, the easier it gets. It's a question of practice. A question of practice that you do this, of course. This is not something which is easy. Yeah? But you have to be mindful that you need to be a balanced person. Why? For me, there's another reason, because falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan. How many of you are familiar with falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan? We are in a university, I mind you, and falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan about the university. Yeah? The falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan talks about kita nak menghasilkan insan yang seimbang dan harmonis. That's the first thing. Dia kata kita nak menghasilkan insan seimbang dan harmonis. Seimbang atas apa? Seimbang atas 4 perkara: intellectual, jasmani, rohani, emosi. It's 4 elements. Ini saja cukuplah. Look at your curriculum. Seimbang ke tidak? Look at yourself. Seimbang ke tidak? Kalau kita cikgu, kalau kita tidak seimbang, macam mana anak murid kita boleh seimbang? Kalau kita VC, kalau VC tak seimbang, macam mana pendaftar bendaharinya boleh jadi seimbang? Kalau kita menteri, kalau menteri tak seimbang, macam mana VC-nya boleh seimbang? It goes up. Okay? And this seimbang ni is important thing. Dan seimbang 4 ini, dia kata datang daripada mana? Dia tak kata datang from Cambridge, Oxford. Dia kata datang padanya kepatuhan dan ketaatan kepada Tuhan. Simple. Dan dia menggunakan Tuhan, dia tak kata Allah SWT, kerana dia ada problem pula nanti. Ya? Dia kata ketaatan dan kepatuhan kepada Tuhan. So maknanya nilai ini adalah nilai yang datang daripada ilahi, Rabbani bentuknya. So when the Americans does it differently, we say, ini tak ada kena-mena dengan kita, so we can, never mind lah. You take it away, it's nothing to do with us, the value is not the same. We have the option to say that. So when the ranking says this, it's tak kena-mengena pada kita, never mind, skip the ranking because this is our value. The ranking is not our value. And this is where the authenticity comes in. You know where you make your decision and how the decision is arrived at. You can say no to certain things, not just yes all the time. Yeah? Dan bila dah ada kepatuhan dan kepercayaan kepada Tuhan itu, dia kata manusia ini mesti ada kesejahteraan diri. We will connect that later on. Bila kalbu itu sudah patuh kepada Tuhan, dia akan sejahtera. Yeah? Now konsep sejahtera ni apa dia? Salam sejahtera. Everybody talk about salam sejahtera. Everybody sing sejahtera Malaysia. Every Kedah, siapa daripada Kedah ni? Kedah ada tagline Kedah sejahtera. I don't know whether Kedah is sejahtera now. Yeah? And I go to Kelantan, dekat apa ni, dekat Pasar Katijah, ada tandas sejahtera. How more sejahtera can you get? You know? But what is sejahtera? Who understands sejahtera? Because sejahtera is the operational word. If you cannot operationalize sejahtera, you can never get pelajar-pelajar kita sejahtera. Kenapa dalam falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan mengatakan hanya pelajar-pelajar yang sudah mencapai kesejahteraan diri baru boleh menyumbang kepada dirinya, keluarganya, masyarakatnya dan negaranya. So bila kita tengok sekarang ni banyak corruption, banyak bullying, banyak sexual harassment, soal yang saya tanya, dah sejahtera ke kita ni? Kalau kita sejahtera, why is this problem becomes a very prevalent problem? Yeah? So this is the whole idea. At the end of the day, when we translate this into institutional, we need to come back to this whole scheme of balance. Yeah?